how we fix problems in the world. We're not going to fix them with bombs and bullets and things like that, but through connection and getting to understand people, this is how we dissolve all those problems.
Thank you for being here. It's an honor to have this conversation, and I have to tell you, when looking at sort of your bio and seeing the things that you've done and what your expertise is in, immediately caught my attention because it's not something that I even realized was like a thing, to be honest with you, as a sort of profession to be in. And I have to ask you, how did you get started in that?
All came about from the fact that I went through 2 divorces, a lot of broken relationships, and even business partners who emptied the bank out. So I had to learn. It was a necessity. That's where it all came from.
Wow. So, I mean, that's a lot to go through. Where do you start there? Because I feel like, for most people going through that sort of process, there would be a natural inclination to just say, hey, something's not working right. Screw this, I give up. Like, where do you find the resilience to not only keep going forward, but to keep leveling up and being a better version of yourself?
More to the point, it came down to not wanting to go through the same stuff over and over, just realizing life had to change. And so the only way forward, or the only thing you can do, is move forward. As they say, as one door closes behind you, if you're focusing on that, you miss the doors that are opening. There's usually multiple doors. Biggest thing is, which way do I go after I move forward? Yeah. So as you say, there's a lot in this. Your audience, tell me a bit more about your audience and how I can best serve them today and serve you.
Well, yeah, so the audience here is comprised of people who are successful, typically in one area, whether that might be, hey, you're doing really well professionally, but your relationship is suffering, or you've done phenomenally well in your relationship and your business, but you have no spiritual life. So this audience is people who are dedicated to saying, hey, I realized success was not as simple as I thought it was, right? Because most people start with this vision of success that they think they're going to reach, and then they're going to get divine happiness. And ultimately, a lot of people realize either they get there and they realize it's not what I thought, or they have some traumatic experience along the way that kind of shakes them up, whether it's a divorce, whether it's a loss of a career, whatever that moment is, where they realize success is way deeper than that, right? It's being the best version of yourself and the pursuit of that excellence in all of these areas, right? Where we talk about your physical health, your relational health, your emotional health, your financial health, your professional health, and your, I forget which one, the last one I'm looking at, physical might be the last one. But right, so being the best version of yourself in every possible sense. So for me, when I like to have these conversations, it's finding people who have been through some level of life-altering event and done what you've done, right? They've said, hey, I'm not giving up at this. I'm not only going to come back, but I'm going to come back better. And I'm going to come back so freaking hard that I'm going to get a level of expertise that I can then come back and help other people level up.
Excellent.
And that's what these conversations are. It's putting a highlight on someone like yourself who's done that level of work and exposing other people to that conversation where they might hear this and say, hey, that's a really interesting thing I never even knew existed. Right? How can we learn more? How can I apply this to my life? How can I level up as well? Does that make sense?
Yep. Perfect. Yeah, not
cool.
At all.
So with that said, if you'd be kind enough to kind of start a little bit with some more of your backstory and kind of get people familiar with who you are, kind of how you got started on this, we can dive into that conversation.
Not a problem at all. Happy to share.
Yeah, let's jump in.
Excellent.
Whenever you're ready, feel free.
Okay. Right, yeah, so you're recording this already, are you? Oh, yeah, I saw that.
Yes. Yeah, we're good to go.
Okay. Well, it all started for me when I was a young fella. My father died when I was 3, so I grew up with my mother. Now, my mother was very resilient, and I think that's where I built my resilience from. And that was watching her, the things she went through. And as I grew up, I realized it was the work ethics I got from her. It was always how to move forward, how to do the right thing, and always do it with integrity as well. And so I think that was the foundation that I've had behind me all the way through. When I look at when I first left school and started working, I worked for the national telephone carrier over here, which was actually called the PMG in those days, the Postmaster General's Department. It was a post office and also the telephone company together in one. When I finished my training with them, I was 23 years old and I was put in charge of a group of men who were all older than me. My second in charge was 38 and I was 23, and I had to get them on side. There were about 5 men that I was working with. That was the first challenge. And in those days, I started working with body language and getting to understand people that way, because that's what was the flavour of the day with people like Alan Pease. And then in the 80s, I got involved with psychometric profiling, so trying to learn to read and understand people by asking questions. But about that time, I also got involved with a surf club and started using their gym, and they told me that if I wanted to continue using the gym, I had to become a surf lifesaver and also then do all the bronze medallion, etc. Did that, and when I'd finished that program, the day after I finished it, they asked me to be a patrol captain. Now, the day I became the patrol captain, I realised that they gave me everybody else that nobody else wanted. That was why they got me into that role, because I thought with my background in telecom, or Postmaster General's Department at that time, I might be able to do something with them. Well, I turned it into the Patrol of the Year and then became the club captain the following year, and then zone supervisor of 3 beaches after that. But I had to learn how to read people. So I was always looking at how do I move forward? And that was the one thing that I think a lot of people struggle with. They get a challenge, as you were saying before, that it comes up and they just go, what do I do? Why am I even trying? And they give up. Well, I realised that we're so many years on this planet, and if we give up, life is just going to stay that same way. The only way we can change that is by moving forward, doing things differently, looking at what I'm doing and going, how can I do things differently? So moving from that area, I then left the national telephone carrier and became a businessman. I started my own business working with other people. And in that, I've been through a lot of business partners, some of them who weren't very good. But as I mentioned, they emptied the bank out, and I realised I had to learn how to read people. But in the late 80s, early 90s, I had my first divorce, and I had 3 sons to raise on my own. They were 4, 11 and 12. Now, that was another challenge. Here I am, leaving telecom, running my own business, and raising 3 boys on my own. Again, I think it was the fact that I had so much going on, I didn't have time to stop and think. I just had to do. And sometimes that's a good thing, that when you don't have a lot to think about, so you have a lot to... You actually move forward on those things that are around you. You have to move forward on them. So the end result from there, started my own business, and I've been in business ever since. And that was around about 91 that I started doing that. And I've worked in a whole bunch of different industries. But one of the things I learned was to keep my eyes open for the lessons that were coming through. What was happening around me, because everything was happening for a reason. And from all of those things, as I went through that, I just kept on learning new and more skills, and became a profiler once I realised that with body language, I had my NLP Masters certificates. I was working with psychometric profiling, as I said before, Myers-Briggs, DISC and programs like that. The only problem with those was when you ask people questions, they quite often don't understand what you're saying, will answer it in one way, which is different to what they really would do in real life, or they will give you false answers anyway, because they're wondering about, what are you asking? Why are you asking this? What should I answer? And so that's when I then decided I needed to have more skills. But I just went through my second divorce around about that time as well, in the early 2000s. And I just realised I needed to have a better way of reading people, because I'm going to be around people for the rest of my life. And I didn't want to go through the same thing over and over again. I just had to go out and learn better skills. And somebody mentioned to me one day when I was running a workshop where we were doing some profiling with Myers-Briggs programs, that if somebody walked up to me and said, you ever looked at reading faces? Now, I think the main thing in my life has been, I think it was one of the coaches over there, John Wooten over in UCLA, who had said the most important thing you'll ever learn is the next thing you learn after you know everything. And so when this gentleman, while I was running that workshop, walked up to me and said, "You ever looked at reading faces?" My curiosity was sparked, and that's where I've started learning how to read faces, and from there, that's where my profession has gone. And my relationships have just gone through the roof. I've got a lot of people around me. My family's close to me. I've got a lot of friends. My business is going extremely well. I'm learning new skills. And now with my business, I'm also creating and training my competition, because I believe we need more people doing what I'm doing, but they've got to be doing it right. So I decided I need to train other people. So this has been the main thing for me. It's been events that happened, but always looking forward. I remember when I closed my first business and the accountant said to me, "Well, you got no money left, etc." And he said, "You got a smile on your face." And he said, "Why?" I said, well, every door shuts. If I focus on the door that's shut, I'm going to be miserable. Life's going to be crap. But if I turn around and look for the next door that's opening, my biggest decision is going to be, which one do I go through? Because for every one that closes, there are multiple ones that open if you focus in that direction. You want the same with what you've always got, or do you want something new? And that's always been that's driven me. I always wanted to learn something new and keep growing.
Yeah, I love that. And I especially love your dedication to reading people through either microexpressions or body language, mostly because it's a thing that I think every person can benefit from, and not everyone's going to be a master at it, right? But I believe if people take some interest in learning the basics, right, learning how to communicate better with each other, how much better would their relationships be? How much more successful would their life look in terms of their relationships, their businesses, their emotional health, by being able to properly communicate? One of the things I often say is communication has 4 very integral parts: what is said, what is heard, what is meant, and what is understood. Right? Because a lot of times communication, you just look at, hey, I said something to you. That's it. That's the end of communication. Right? That person stops taking responsibility for what you hear or what you understand. So I believe if we start to learn how to read people's body language, how to read their facial expressions, we can get a better sense of the words that they're saying and communicate better. Do you sort of agree?
Exactly. So when you look at it, you've got 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 mouth, and you use them in that proportion whenever you're talking to people. And whenever we talk about active listening, but active listening, a lot of people don't get it, fully understand it. It's really being focused on the other person fully. As I say, you've got 2 ears, 2 eyes, and 1 mouth. Use them in that proportion. When you're using your mouth, ask every possible question you can. And then when you finish that, ask one more. And people always say to me, how the hell can I ask one more question after I've asked all the questions I can think of? Very simply, from what you've been telling me, this is what I understand. Have I got it right? Dead easy, because if the person then says, yes, you have, they know you've been listening, you've got rapport, you've got a relationship. If they say no, that can even be better, because when they say no, you ask them, well, where have I got this wrong? What have I misunderstood? Now you're not only asking questions, now you're in a deep conversation. And this is where it all comes through. Back to another point you said a moment ago, you talked about, most people don't have these skills. Well, every young child, except for a very small portion of children who couldn't recognize facial features or expressions, every last person on the planet was a perfect profiler. Think about it. If you're a parent with a young child, how often do they push you to the edge but don't push you over? They've read you. They're understanding your expressions, your emotions and everything else. They pick it all up. And every child needed to be able to recognize facial features, to know who was dad, who was mum, who were family, who were people they should stay away from. At the same time, they need to be able to pick up the emotions. So if I recognize somebody as a young child who I shouldn't be around, and that person's looking angry, the warning bells go on to get the hell out of there. If, however, it's a family member and they're angry, then I can go, well, what's going on? I can try and help them. Now, but when we get to a certain age, we get involved in sports and hobbies, going to school and all these other activities. And it's like a muscle. If you don't work it all the time, keep working it, it will atrophy. So what I'm doing today is nothing that a child hasn't done before. We all did it. And that's why I was able to pick up a lot of the skills very quickly, and knowing that everybody else can do the same thing. So when I'm talking to people and they say, can I be as good as you? I go, well, I expect you to be better, because you already have a skill inside you. You have your own gifts that you're bringing to the table, your own experience, and I'm going to give you everything that I've got as well. So you'll be able to do this better than me once you get into it. And this is the thing, we always limit ourselves. I'm saying to people, stop limiting yourselves. You never know your full potential. You put anybody under pressure, they will usually come through. We see people in war times, in pressure areas, they'll step up because they feel they have to. It's what they need to do for everybody else around them. Everybody's got it in them.
But how do we get it out of them is the question, right? How do they remove that part? And I love what you said, right? So we're sort of born as perfect profilers, most of us, because I think it lines up nicely with a theory of mine anyway, and I'd love to hear your feedback on it, is that as we grow, we start to bring in more outside influence, right? Because we're around the world more, and we start to listen to other people's opinions of us, and we start to lose that authentic vision of who we really are, right? So I'm curious for your thoughts on how much of the ability to read facial expressions, read body language has to do with removing yourself from the conversation, because you're not worried about being seen and heard. You're able to receive what other people are saying and pick up on that because you're not so focused on yourself. Does that track?
See, we're emotional beings and we react to everything around us. And once we react, we're now caught up in the moment. When it comes to reading people, so your facial features tell me your personality. I can get that from a photograph. And the way it works is every thought we have, we actually express it on our faces. We keep thinking the same way. We're going to keep working the same muscles in our face over and over again. So the ridges and crevices that we create on our face over time are a history of our nurture traits, the ones that we create in response to our environment. And we have our nature traits that were passed down from our parents. So I can look at a young child and know what their skills are. I can tell you where their strengths are. I can tell you what they're going to be like when they get to school, what hobbies and sports will suit them. When they're at school, before they pick their final subjects, we have a good idea then of what careers will suit their personality, so we can direct them in the right direction to find the right subjects to go and do, to be able to then go and do the career that they love. This is the whole thing. The face tells us everything. So the facial features will tell me that. So as soon as I see somebody, I'm analysing them straight away to go, okay, how does this person like to process their information? How do they like to be treated? How much space do they need when I meet them for the first time, for instance? Because if I invade their space, they're not going to be comfortable. They're not going to be listening to me. So all of these things I can see. So my focus is no longer on me, it's on them. And I'm doing it so that I can connect with them, build a relationship. So There's no, I'm doing this to be able to manipulate them. There's none of that rubbish, because when you start manipulating people, it's hard work. You've got to keep doing it over and over again. But if you can build a relationship, it flows nice and easily. And so by putting the focus on the person, then that works well. In the conversation, from the feedback I get from their body language and their microexpressions, the little twitches on the face, I now know, did I read them right? Was there something emotional going on? And are they telling the truth? But I don't use the truth, that side of it, as a lie detector. I use it as a truth seeker. If somebody's not happy, I want to know why they're not happy. Is there something going on that I can help them with? If I'm doing that, if I'm doing a sale, for instance, I'll put the sale aside. We'll build that relationship by helping them to find out what's going on. And then if the time permits, I'll go back to the sale. If not, I'm pretty sure they're going to come back to me at some point to continue the conversation.
Yeah. I love that. I think it's almost counterintuitive to what people will most naturally do, because most people want to be seen and heard because they don't feel seen and heard in other areas of their life. So they approach these conversations just looking to sort of vomit out words because they want to be seen and heard. And I love the way that you said that, because to me, what I'm hearing is, if you are willing to put that aside for a second and just listen to somebody else and pick up the things that they are saying verbally and non-verbally, you will hear them at such a deep level that you will be able to build a stronger relationship where they will be able to then hear and see you way better than if you just came up to them and just spat out whatever you had to say.
That's it.
Is that right?
That's right. If you just, as you say, if you just spit it all out, they're not going to be listening to you because it becomes too much for them. You're not talking about anything they're interested in. But the moment you start talking about the other person, getting them to open up and start to tell you about themselves, they accept that you're really interested, etc. You're building a relationship straight away. That's when you really start to be seen and heard. While you're just vomiting all this information out to them, you're not being really seen or understood. And this is the whole thing, because every human being, we need to feel that we belong, that we're valued, that we have a place, that we feel trusted. So if we've got all of that, and you don't get that when you're talking at people, you only get it when you're talking with them. And so the more you can get them to open up and start to tell you, the more interest they then take in you. And that's the way to get their interest, not by vomiting it out, but by allowing them to share with you first of all.
I love that. It's very selfless, I believe. And I think the more that we can be selfless in relationship, the more we are served, which again seems counterintuitive, but through going through this for a number of years, in the relationships that I have now, that I show up in a selfless way where I'm saying, hey, how can I serve you? How can I, what do you got going on? Tell me, let me be here for you. Those are people who now I have deep relationships with, where I know if I do need to say something, they'll be receptive because we've built that relationship, right? There's a level of trust.
That's it.
And they know that there is a genuine interest in that. It's not surface level.
That's it. So I love the two words, selfish and selfless. They're both together always at the same time, because when I was younger, my first 50 years was trying to create relationships with me and not doing a very good job of it. I'm in my 70s now, so the last 20-something years, I've been focused on building relationships with other people to be able to help them understand them. Now, I could say I'm as selfish as anything, because I've now got all the relationships I would have liked in my 50s, the first 50 years. I've got those coming out of every corner of my life. They're everywhere because of what I've actually done to help other people. I run a group called the Campfire Project, which is a safe place for men and women to be able to come and tell their stories. The stories have never been able to tell anybody before. And I created that because, especially with men in business, most men didn't know their place at home and didn't know their place at work. I'd ask them, give me a word to describe your home life and your business life. And quite often the words that came back were confused and frustrated. And when I said, well, tell me more about that, I said, well, tell me about your home life. And they said, well, we thought, especially Gen X and baby boomers like me, we were told to go out, bring the resources in and look after the family. So we would show our love for the family by being absent. Now, the thing that our family's telling us, especially today, that we're physically and emotionally absent. So then we go, okay, we'll be at home. And then we were at home, we're not bringing the resources in. So the end result was, it's frustrating. You can't be in two places at once. And that was causing a lot of confusion and even anger. And in some places, even some domestic violence, because it was pushed to the hill. In the workplace, most men were saying, well, look, with gender equality and political correctness, we're always trying to do the right thing. But what we can say today, the rules are changed tomorrow. And now we get into trouble for saying things that were acceptable for a long period of time. And that was causing bullying in the workplace as well. So I created the Campfire Project, a safe place where people would just come along and tell their stories. And that was a good education for me, because I sit there and there's not many questions asked. When I first do an introduction, we record it like we're doing today, and I would ask them, this is what you're doing today. Tell us your journey. How did you get here? And at that point, I don't say anything else. They just keep talking. As long as they keep talking, I don't interrupt them, because I know that, excuse me, this is their therapy. This is an opportunity for them finally to be able to say something and know that there's a human being in front of them who is listening without judgment, without counselling, without telling them they're right or wrong, but just listening to them. And everybody wants to know that people hear them. So in that case, I give them that space. The end result is when I had my 70th birthday in the middle of COVID, that was celebrated on 7 continents. We were on a Zoom call that went on all day with all the different time zones coming in, with people talking about how my work in business or in the Campfire Project had changed their lives, if not saved their lives. And so, realising that by building and focusing on other people, as I was trying to be selfish in my first 50 years to get those relationships, by no longer being selfish, but now trying to serve people, all of a sudden now I've got relationships all around me. So it's just recognising that as they say, if you want to go far, go on your own. But if you want to go fast, or if you want to go fast, go on your own. But if you want to go farther, go with others. And I realised that it's a lot more fun when you've got people around you and you're not acting like a hermit. And this is the best way to be.
Yeah, I love that. Especially because of how deep those relationships are, right? Because I'm sure you had these relationships for the first portion of your career in your life that were probably surface level, right? You didn't connect on a deep level, where now you've got these people who are truly connected, and those relationships mean so much more. And it comes from being willing to show up and listen and genuinely care. And I love that. Let's talk practical application for a second, because there's going to be someone listening to this who's now interested, and I think we've made a good case for why understanding microexpressions or body language is important to feel seen and heard. Where does someone begin in that process? We talked about removing the need to just spit out your words, right? So let's assume that the person listening to this has gotten over that, where they can be willing to remove themselves from it and be open to receiving the nonverbal communication. Where does someone start picking up on body language or facial expressions to understand where somebody else is?
Well, one of the best places, without going and I've got plenty of courses, I've written books and other things, but the whole thing is just start observing. This is what I say to people: just slow down, step back. Don't worry about jumping in and having talks with people. But even when you're walking down the street, in the shopping malls, in public transport, any of those places, watch people. See how they interact, and just start to do that, because that will quieten your mind down. Because when we're talking, we're always trying to think of what's the next thing we're going to say. So the first thing is zip this up so that you're not expressing anything, but just watch and observe. See how people are interacting. You'll start to see the connections that people have. It's like when I learnt microexpressions, for instance. I did a lot of training with on the computer and that, reading the expressions, but I found one of the best ways to do it was recording interviews with politicians or business people, etc., and not watching it at the time I recorded it, but when I played it back without any sound, and just watching the people moving around, the way their expressions were, what was happening at the time. And then I'd pick up a change of somebody's expression. Then when I'd listen to it later on, and I'd see that expression come up and I'd hear what was said, I go, now I know what was going on there. And so our biggest issue was, at school, we were always told to sit and listen. We focused on the words. But in communication, the words are only worth a fraction of the full communication. They talk about the words being 7%, the tone of voice being 38%, and the body language, etc., being 55%. Now, all three of those, regardless of their percentage, are absolutely necessary for the communication. You have to have the words. If you don't have the words, you're just moving around and grunting and all the rest of it. That's not communication. So we need the words as well. But the thing is, the information that's conveyed in the words is only a fraction of what you can really see. The non-verbals win every time. And so by watching people, sit and go, okay, stop asking questions, stop trying to be the person talking in it, observe people. When they're talking, for instance, watch their mannerisms, watch the people around them, how they're reacting. It's surprising how much you can pick up just with that itself.
Yeah, I love that. It makes me wonder your take on text messages, right? People who rely on sending conversation via text message, because when you do that, you're obviously missing an important element of tone of voice and body language. It's just the words. Right? So I believe people can really take that for a ton of different meanings. And I personally do whatever I can to not have conversation via text message, unless it's like a super important update that isn't relevant to emotion or anything like that. That's just very cut and dry. Otherwise, most of it will be verbal. I'm curious your take on that. Do you believe that we rely too heavily on text message and that's sort of messing things up?
Totally agree with you there. Far too much. What we actually do is, or people send me a long text message or a long email or anything like that, I just send back the message TLDR. Too long, didn't read. And that's what they'll get from me every time. The problem is that when you read somebody else's text, you're reading it with your emotions. You're not reading it with what they were feeling at the time they wrote it. So more times than not, we will misunderstand what they've actually said. Then we react to that because we jump in really quickly. We have to respond emotionally. And next thing you know, we create a problem. And so I will take on a text message or an email, give me directions, send me a message about something. If you want to discuss it, either get together with me face-to-face, get on a video call, or pick the phone up. At least on the phone, I can hear your tone of voice in your body language. So body language, etc., in the tone of voice that you've got. So I can know what the emotions are when you're reading it. I know how you're feeling. In a text message, I can't. And that's where the problem comes in. People put themselves into the text message and react with that. So if you're having a bad day, you're going to take offense to what was written. If you're having, and there's been quite a few comedy sketches done about this where text messages have been sent backwards and forwards, and one person at one end has been really laid back. The one in particular I'm thinking of, he's actually been smoking his bong, so he's pretty high, etc. And his mate's sending him messages saying, where are you, etc. And he's responding back. He's going back in a very happy way, and the other guy's taking offence to it. Next thing you know, this one on the other side wants to have a fight with him. And it's how things get built up out of proportion. And so I say, if I can't see your face, then I already know I'm down a level. If I can hear your voice, at least I've got that. But if you just sent me a text message, I'm not going to respond to long messages. I see websites all the time that just go on and on and on, almost like the Dead Sea Scrolls. They just roll out. I don't read them. I want to have a conversation with somebody. Somebody can send me a lot of information through and I go, okay, let's jump on a call. 5 minutes, I can get a feeling for who you are, where you're coming from. Is this something that I can trust? I can't trust a text. There's, the emotion that's in it is only the emotion I put into it, not the other person's.
Right. So I'm hearing you say there's a certain responsibility that we have as the receiver of that, not to allow our emotion to cloud that, but to say, hey, let's actually speak about it so I can really, truly understand what it is you're trying to convey.
That's it. So they say that we are 80% emotion and about 20% logic. So whenever we buy anything, for instance, it's always bought with emotion. We justify it with logic. Bought a particular car. Why did you buy that particular car? Yes, I need a sedan to get from A to B because of things I carry in it. Might take the family, for instance. What sort of car? That's totally emotional. All cars will get you from A to B. But what you want in there, that becomes an emotional decision. So we do that, but I disagree with that 80-20. I say that we are 20% logic and 100% emotion. Our emotions are in there all the time. And a good example of it, we get onto Facebook or social media. And this is what got me. The research has shown that when somebody starts to speak and talk about an issue, it's 19 seconds before somebody else will jump in and try and fix the situation or take a side. We all jump on and take sides. We react too fast. If we slow that reaction down, we can then step back from the situation and we can start to see what's really happening. When anybody says anything, my first thing that goes through my mind is, what are they trying to say? And more to the point, where is this coming from? Are they having family members, for instance? You might have a brother, a sister, a mother, a father, or something who is angry at the time. And you think, what did I do to make them angry? But then you realise that there's been events that happened before that, which has put them in that particular state. But because they couldn't take it out on the other person, they don't take it out on us. Right. So this is one of the reasons I say the more that we can understand. So if somebody starts getting upset and having a go at me, my first thing is, where's this coming from? And most of the time I'll find that it's got nothing to do with me. But because I didn't react, I didn't make it mine. And that's where people go wrong. They react to it emotionally, make it their problem, and therefore the relationship they got with that person breaks down.
Wow.
Now, I've had people walk
That's really
up.
good.
There's one guy in particular who's a friend of another friend of mine. He walked up to me one day in the street and he said, just had to have a chat with you. He said, in the past I didn't like you at all. He said, but I've just watched you over the years and you're consistent. You're constant. You always do the same thing. And we became friends. So it
makes me think a lot of how people will spend time, let's say, browsing social media. And there's this natural inclination to, every time they read anything at all, they have to jump in and give their opinion on it, right? They make that their problem. And how those people wind up losing so much time and energy to stuff that doesn't apply to them, because they make it their problem. I love that.
Yeah. See, I'll look at it and go, okay, what's going on here? What's really happening in the situation? Because I know if I jump in, I become part of the problem. I can't help somebody whenever I get emotionally connected to it. When I'm distant from it, so I've had some horrific stories being told to me by some of the men who have come in, or even women as well, that we also have in there, that have of their past. And I don't take it on. I'm not, in the past, I've been a very highly emotional person, and I used to get drawn into everything. So it's not that I've gone cold. It's that I've learned that I'm not helping myself, I'm not helping the other person if I respond to what's going on without going, first of all, checking with it, what is actually happening here? How can I best serve this person? How can I serve myself at the same time? Again, another thing I'll tell everybody to do is think about the words you're using. I know there's a phrase in business where all these people are saying they're servant leaders. Well, I'm sorry, you cannot lead while you're a servant, but you can be a serving leader. So if you serve people, you can serve them, you're serving yourself. A servant takes directions. How can you be a servant and a leader at the same time? So this is the thing I would say to people, think about the words you're using and how they're impacting on you as well. Because one of the areas that gives us most of our problems is not the people around us. It's how we take it in and then process it in our own head. We become the problem.
Right, because how much of our day do we spend talking to ourselves? Yeah, the language that you speak to yourself is so incredibly important, and I believe is one of the things that most people totally miss.
See, I serve people every day, but there is no way I would ever be a servant. And so I'll never use that word in any title I give myself.
When it comes to body language, is there an effect on yourself with your own body language, like how you respond to a negative activity, right? I think if we look at the example that comes to mind for me is children's sports. If you look out on a field and a kid makes a mistake and they immediately throw their equipment down and they get upset, versus the kid who kind of shrugs it off and then keeps on moving. Those are two very different choices in body language. How do those choices affect not only the people around them, but also themselves?
Well, because of that emotional impact that we have on everybody else, the way they then respond back to it, it's going, people, as I said, they step back from it. They're not going to be sucked into that. They're not going to be caught up in it. So if I see a child do as you said, throw their things down, I go, okay, well, they're having a bad time. I don't think about it. I don't really give it much energy. Same as if they're really happy. Well, I'm happy to see that they're happy, that they responded and we move forward. But to respond, like how many times do we see parents become the problem when the child's having, reacting in a certain way and the parent takes it on? Next thing you know, you've got parents fighting on the sideline. What lesson are you teaching your kids when you're doing that? It's crazy. But if you can go up to a child who was upset and everything else and have a chat with the child later on and help to guide them through and talk about, well, in fact, a bit of more practice or whatever it might be. But we have made a problem in our society today with a lot of the, they call it gentle parenting, but I call it more of a soft parenting, in which we're not guiding our kids how to deal with the situation. We're expecting them to be able to make decisions when their brain hasn't fully developed. Our job as parents, we are not sculptors and we're not carpenters. Our job is not to turn our kids into something. We're gardeners. Our job is to nurture them, to help them to grow into the best version of themselves. And you can only do that when you're guiding them in that particular way, supporting them, not getting caught up in what's going on around them in their emotions, but being able to be that logical mind around them who can then guide them and say, hey, this is why you reacted there before. How did that serve you? Did it make you feel any better? What if you tried this? And you put suggestions and everything else, but you then allow them to do those. But you guide them. You don't just give them the keys to the cupboard, so to speak, or to the fridge, by just saying, okay, what do you want to do? Or compounding the problem by reacting along with them as well.
Right.
I remembered my mother, and that when I was very young, if something happened to me, she would go into, bring out the arms, and she'd be out there fighting with people. And I remembered one day my older sister, was playing with the girl next door. They were usually playing their tea parties and things, and they got into a fight. Next thing you know, her mother and my mother are fighting away. And I turned around and I watched my sister and her the friend next door still back playing with their game. And I looked at it, and I was just shaking my head thinking, they were fighting earlier. Then the mothers and that took over. And they said, well, the parents are looking after this now. We can get back to what we were doing. I thought it was totally insane. And I realised that we jump in too much to take on other people's problems. We need to stop and go, okay, what really happened here? What was the lead up to it? Who's really responsible? Because I love using little videos. I've got a great little one where there's a guy, he looks a little bit on the rough side, running down who's standing there, and all of a sudden he takes off. As he takes off, there's a car that comes around the corner with two men sitting in the front. And so everybody thinks he's running away from them. Then you see him running towards another man on the sidewalk, well-dressed with a suit and carrying a briefcase, and he's running towards him. So the first thing people think, oh, he's going to attack him. No, he runs up to him and pushes him against the wall as a piano falls from the upper floor and lands on the ground. So it was all these little bits of it. Everyone got a different story from it. And we see it with videos that are put up on YouTube every day. It might be something to do with the police. What happened before that little segment? Because the person who put that segment up wanted to get their story out there,
right.
And if they're not happy with the police, they want to get everybody else unhappy with the police. But what led up to it? What did they do that instigated the police to be involved in that situation in the first place? We need to step back from things. So when any time anything's happening, especially when it's really emotional, I go, right, now I really have to step back even further. This is the best way I can care for people, by jumping in with emotionally. I'm not caring for them. I'm actually instigating a greater problem. If I step back, that's the way I can really care, because then I can get the real picture, and I then know how to perform or how to behave with that from that point on. It's all about being present in your own mind and not getting caught up in the moment, so to speak.
Yeah, that's good. And I think there's an important part there too of what's the point? Like, what is the goal? Going back to the two parents fighting with each other. What is the goal of that argument about? Are they trying to bring peace to their children? Because the children already achieved that on their own. So now are they just fighting with each other just to see who's right and who's wrong? Right? I see this a lot of times when you mention this, let's say, video of an experience with the police or whatever the video is. How many times will you go down to the comments and people have an opinion that they feel the need to share, and then there's a whole host of comments with people just arguing back and forth with each other that has now become totally irrelevant to the original point, because they just need to argue to prove who's right and who's wrong.
That's it.
I think people lose sight of the fact of what is the point of this conversation in the first place, and why are you even in it?
That's it. So when I read something on Facebook or hear video or whatever, I always ask myself, well, what was the lead up to this? What's the bigger picture around it? And especially if I see somebody has put in a really emotional response, I'm not going to put any comments on there. And in fact, I will actually, if I have my notifications in there, I then tell the Facebook not to notify me with any more comments, because I don't want to be drawn into it. So it's a way of making sure that I stay separate from it. And if you don't, you're just going to be drawn in, and the things just go down the wrong road.
It's good. So there's a sort of an active process of gardening the content that you consume to protect yourself against falling into that trap of negativity and drama and everything else that's just going to suck you down.
That's it. So many years ago, I was about 8 years ago, I was on Facebook and I'd put a comment on one of the posts that were up there, and there was another gentleman who took offence to what I said. But then he made his comment, and I thought, hang on, this guy's really saying the same thing as me, but he hasn't realised it. So I put a little comment in just to test it out, and he came back again. I thought, aha, he is, but he definitely doesn't realise it. So I sent him a personal message saying, hey, on the post you just put up, I reckon you're talking about the same thing I am. How about we jump on a call? Well, we jumped on the call, and as we were talking, he found out what it is that I do. And as we went through it, he said, well, I've got 2 daughters. I'm not connecting with them. And he paid me to profile them. Then when I was over in England doing a bit of work with Disney Films and Gillette, and while I was there, he was chasing me through his nighttime over here in Australia while it was daytime over there. And he wanted to know about my master course. So he signed up on my master course. This is why I say to people, if you want to get a great response from things, don't react. Follow it through, have a conversation with the person, go, hey, I just really want to understand your viewpoint on this. Let's not fight about it. Let me understand you. Because I listen to people, as I said before, not to respond, but to understand. I don't have to be right. I need to understand. Because if I understand, then I know that where there's any conflicts, they're going to disappear really quickly. And in fact, that person I'm talking to became one of my strongest advocates. And the testimonials he did after we did the work together were brilliant. I've been using those on a regular basis. Now, if I had just responded and stayed negative in those conversations, those comments on that Facebook profile, we both would have lost. Yeah. And what he learned from me was able to double his business. And so it was a win for both of us, simply because one party decided not to have a fight about it. And that's the thing I always say to people. If you want to win a situation, don't fight. Start to understand. If you understand, the other person you'll either work out this is somebody that I really don't want to be near. This is something wrong with this person. Sociopath, narcissist, psychopath, or something like that. But everybody else who doesn't fit into those categories, I guarantee your relationship will change for the positive. The number of people who have started to have a fight with me have become my strongest advocates over the years, simply because I refuse to fight. I want to understand.
That's really good. That is exceptional advice. I think that there's also, we have to highlight the other person's decision to be receptive to have that conversation. Because, I think a lot of times they'll be so caught up in that argument about trying to prove themselves right, they won't even take the time to listen to somebody else. But I know, matter of fact, I could probably go back and pull up 10 conversations where I said, hey, let's have a conversation. We're talking about the same thing. And the immediate response from the other party will be just jump right down your throat because they're still in attack mode. So I think it highlights a great point to be willing to have conversations with people and maybe be wrong.
That's it.
Be wrong about the fact that you assumed the other person was a certain way and be open to having conversation to get to understanding, even if that means you're both a little wrong or you're both a little right. Ultimately, you're both trying to achieve understanding.
That's it. As I said, my earlier part of my life, I was very emotional. I was responding and reacting to everything that was happening around me. And so when anybody says, oh, I don't know if I can, be, not disconnected, but step back from things, I go, well, you just check out my background. When people always say to me, and that, can I be as good as you? How what you've been through, etc. I said, if you look at what I've been through, you'll realise that you can do exactly what I'm doing and even do it better than me. So, don't, whatever's going on around you at the time, this is where people think in the moment, that's them, that's their life. Well, everything's a decision in life. People don't do things to you. They do things, and then you respond to those and do that to yourself. Once you realise that all the anger you have towards other people is coming from you, and that's like, as I say, hating another person is just like taking poison and hoping they will die. It doesn't work. The only person who suffers is you. So if I can sit there, sometimes if somebody's really going off and they're carrying on and everything else, I'll try not to put an expression on my face because I'll find it a bit amusing. I'll look and go, okay, it's like they'll exhaust themselves sooner or later. If somebody's angry and they keep coming back at you and that, just let them go. Keep them go. Let them keep repeating what they're saying and everything else, because sooner or later they'll run out of energy. And when they run out of energy, then you can step in and go, okay, I understand where you're coming from on that, but can I ask you a few questions? Now, when you're getting that, now you get into a conversation. When you get into a conversation, all of a sudden they go, oh, no, sorry about that.
So I'm hearing you say we have to take responsibility for the meaning that we put on other people's responses.
That's it. Exactly. It's all up to us. The only things we should be taking responsibility for in this world are young children, our children, for instance, and our own behaviour. I still believe, yes, I have a responsibility as a human being. As I say, what you do for yourself dies with you, but what you do for others and for the community isn't always will be eternal. So by doing that, the more I can help this planet to be better than what it was when I first found it, the more I'm helping other people. I didn't realise when I first started doing this how much I was actually helping me. As I said, you can't light someone else's path without lighting your own. So as soon as you start being selfless, being in that particular way, then it works. But I always say to people, like in business, for instance, if you really want to help other people, you need to step back when you're exhausted and everything else and look after yourself. So you become selfish to be selfless. I am selfish at times, but it's mainly to get my energy back up so I can be the best version of myself, so I can then step back in to be helpful to other people again. And when I'm being helpful to them, I always receive back again, because by helping other people, I always feel so much better.
Right.
This is the reason we're all connected and we can't get away from that. We're not individuals.
Right. And oftentimes you'll receive it back tenfold for what you gave.
That's it. As I said, well, if you look at the people I've got around me in the Campfire Project, probably more than tenfold.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Alan, I want to just celebrate you for a minute here, because the work that you do, I know, has tremendous impact on other people. And I know that this conversation will help light someone's light and help give them an opportunity to have those conversations and avoid a little bit of that drama and help them level up in their relationships, their profession. And without you taking responsibility for yourself and the decision to move on in a way that not only helps yourself in that situation, but now it comes back and helps thousands of people. Again, I honor you, because that's truly a selfless thing that has really helped a lot of people, myself included. So thank you tremendously for doing that and for having this conversation. It means a lot. Thanks
very much. And as I said before, while I'm doing that, I'm always receiving. So the more I can help other people, the more I receive in return.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Well, how can we best serve you?
Well, the more that people can learn how to read and understand other people, this is how we improve our society. You know, they say, "Oh, pay it forward." When you help somebody and they go and help somebody else and they go and help somebody else, we find that everyone's got a smile on their face. And so it's a case of, that's what we've been talking to all your listeners and that about not getting caught up in things, but to step back and have a good look at what's going on. Figure out what's really happening, so that if you're happier yourself, you're going to have better relationships with others. And this is how we make a better world. The Campfire Project, we've been working with all the other groups around the world as well, because anybody can come in, they can tell their story. If they happen to be running their own group, they can then share their story of their group and everything else, and we'll promote that to the world free of charge. This is my passion project. It's not a business. And from that, we then get all these people working together. And this is how we fix problems in the world. We're not going to fix them with bombs and bullets and things like that, but through connection and getting to understand people. This is how we dissolve all those problems. So my thing to all your listeners is, start to learn how to read people. If they want to jump onto my website, you'll find a free course on there as well, which will give them a couple of traits they can start to go out and experiment for themselves. Because I realise that once people start to do that, they'll start to realise how much fun it is in reading other people and the joy they get from actually connecting with those people.
Yeah. Good. I love that. So we'll certainly share that message out, because, like I said, I believe it's really beneficial to everyone to hear it and to practice it. And if we could all learn to communicate properly with each other, what a difference that would make.
Certainly would do.
Well, again, thank you. Huge honor to you. Greatly appreciated. And we'll talk soon.
Thanks very much, Jim, for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.